Hello everyone, you're welcome to this week's Tech Tuesdays webinar on what's new in CDI Assurance Package. I'm Rinda, your host for today's webinar. Today we have Rangarajan Margasahayam, Technical Architect from the Digital Experience team for the session. Before we start this webinar, here are some housekeeping tips. This webinar is for 1 hour, including the 15 minutes Q&A. You can post your queries in the Q&A box. Dial-in participants are muted. The session is being recorded and will be available in the Informatica Support YouTube channel and the Success portal. The recording will be emailed to you as well. You can put in your feedbacks and suggestions for the session in the post-webinar survey. The Tech Tuesdays webinar program is hosted within the Success portal. The Informatica Success portal is a microlearning platform offering free and unlimited learning to all registered users. This feature-rich platform was launched to help you learn and use Informatica products better. Here are a few important links that you can go over later that will help you in your product adoption journey with Informatica. Over to you, Ranga. Thank you.
Thanks, Vrinda, for the introduction. Today we'll talk about Informatica's assurance service, some of it, what it means, and why did we come up with such a package, what are the use cases and features of assurance service, and we'll also have a look at the demo. So why did we start doing assurance package? So assurance package is geared towards Informatica's cloud suite of products. It supports currently cloud data integration, cloud application integration on the IICS platform with plan for expanding into all the iPaaS products. So the key idea for us was to help customers to understand how ready are they for their upgrade, what is the impact of a release it's going to create, what is the risk level that's associated with your organization. By constantly monitoring or constantly looking at the changes that are happening in your organization, which kind of provides a lens towards the governance aspect of it, and then finally understanding your organization's health as a whole. The key ROI in all these things is the overall idea is to lower the risk that's associated with when somebody has to perform upgrade related testing, reduce the cost and the time involved in performing these tests by participating in the pre-release program, and how we can help you participate better in the pre-release program by automating some of these things for you. And then getting more into the observability space of it, get more visibility into what is happening in your org for governance and other perspectives. And finally, how Informatica can share in your goals of cloud journey. Some of the key use cases that assurance service addresses is to start providing a mechanism for asset replication, meaning moving your tasks, mappings, processes, guides, etc. from one org to another org in a seamless fashion, thus by promoting a sense of software development lifecycle management to you, and you can then leverage the same feature to participate in the pre-release and choosing the business critical tasks that is important for you to be tested on a pre-release just before an upgrade as well. The second key thing is it improves the observability. We keep track of all the changes that are happening to all the assets that in your environment, and we try to provide recommendations as and when applicable for this thing. And you also get a sense of the velocity and the amount of change that is happening in your organization. The final thing is around automation, running pre-canned health checks on demand, and you can do it for different cadences. And this would help to kind of keep track of the best practices, the configuration changes, the good, bad changes that are happening, and how to kind of course correct it when such things are happening. Those were the use cases. So what are the features, right? So it helps with upgrade management. We give the impact to your organization, especially when there is a major upgrade, and we tend to provide, there is a major upgrade that happens every 3 to 4 months at Informatica's side, and how we can help you streamline that process of participating in the pre-release testing. The pre-release starts 3 weeks prior to your actual organization's upgrade. So you would be able to move the business critical assets in a seamless fashion from your org. And even if you do have a pre-release today and you're participating in it, it can help in avoiding unnecessary metadata that has been created just for the upgrade sake, where you typically want to copy some of these things into a folder and move the file folder en masse to another organization or for the pre-release organization. The other, we spoke about configuration management, how it promotes observability. We'll look into a demo, how this looks like, understanding the features, right, with respect to when an upgrade is happening. What are all the things that are changing, which is going to have an impact on your organization, especially with respect to connectivity? There are a lot of changes that happens with respect to connectivity, and we want to understand whether that's going to have an impact on your organization. Standard organization administration, so you might want to move assets from your dev to QA to UAT to production, so how we can help with that. Metadata that is happening from a governance standpoint, unused connections, unwanted mappings, etc., which are kind of, when left over, either leads to a potential risk, or it can be accidentally used in your DI flow where it would lead to some errors, and then on-demand health assessment. With that said, let's quickly get into a demo. There would be a series of slides after this, which would be available for you post the webinar for your own for your reference, and there would be screenshots explaining about all the features that I'm going to show in the demo as well. So Assurance Service is part of your Informatica Cloud organization. This is like any other service that you have in your organization. You just launch it via the product switcher. There is very limited entry barrier towards Assurance Service. There is really no infrastructure that is needed on your side for us to take advantage of, for you to take advantage of Assurance Service as is. It comes by once it is enabled on your organization, a dashboard like this is built for you, and we keep track of pulling the metadata, refreshing the metadata on our side, and there is really no impact or any sort of installation that is needed on your side. So we spoke about a bunch of features. So let me first start with the thing about configuration changes, right? In your organization, there are changes that are constantly happening. Every time, every day, or during some cadence in production, there is deployments that are happening, development that is happening to the tasks, mappings, process guides, etc., the various assets that are part of your organization. Now, this view gives you a quick heat map of the changes that has happened in the last 90 days, how many changes has happened on a per day basis, and what are all those changes that on the activity. So quickly, by looking at this, you'll be able to see whether there are any off-cycle changes that are happening, especially when there is a scheduled deployment window in your organization. And if so, what are those changes? The second thing is, if it is in a development organization, you get to see like what are all the assets that are typically changing, where is my current development effort focused on. All those things can be quickly identified by looking at the graph, and also by applying various categories filters. You'll be able to see where the changes are and how the changes are happening. Not just that, the reason for keeping track of these things is twofold. Once we know that a particular asset has changed, we want to understand what is its impact, or is there any dependency that's going to be impacted because of changing this asset. Let's say we are having this mapping, right? There has been sequence of changes that has happened to this mapping. Now we see that the mapping has changed in various periods of time in the last 3 weeks here, and just by getting all this information and looking at the relationships, we know that this mapping is used as part of a mapping task, which probably is in turn used as part of a task flow here. So in this case, we are talking about a ripple effect, where the mapping that is part of a mapping task could impact a bigger task flow as well. So this is a single pane of view where you would be able to get what has changed. If this asset has changed, how is it going to impact my organization or the workflows that I'm running? By virtue of the other key advantage of this is, by virtue of keeping track of these changes, we are able to provide you with targeted recommendations which are for your organization, which can be mostly geared towards around tweaking properties, which would help get better performance or avoid errors in the future, so on and so forth. So there are based on the connectivity, based on the configurations that is there on your environment, we provide a various set of recommendations, and this will change as the configurations change in your environment, or you onboard a new secure agent or a new task connections, etc. So it's dynamic enough to make sure that we understand what is happening in your organization and then recommend the right things which are applicable for you. The way these recommendations are constructed is based on us understanding the knowledge that we get from our support organizations, professional service organizations, the best practice that they put out by virtue of seeing the problems that they see. We get to these recommendations. So that's about observability, right? So it kind of the often overlooked piece in when we talk about observability in the DevOps space is the metadata changes, and that's what the configuration changes helps you to do. As a roadmap item, so when we are having this webinar on April 20th, you'll be also, if you have assurance service, one of the key things that we are also working on is, at least on the secure agent level, it not only will say that the agent, some property or something has changed, there has been a change that has happened to this agent, but you'll also be able to drill down and see what was the specific change that happened to that agent at that point in time. So that's a work in progress item that will be released pretty soon. The second thing that we want to talk about is we spoke about the upgrade story, where I kind of told you that you could participate in a pre-release environment, a pre-release program of Informatica just before the upgrade, and how it can help mitigate errors potentially that could be caused if there was a change during an upgrade and that's going to have an impact on your organization. So with that in mind, one of the key things that we have tried to do is to provide an ability to look at all the connectivity in your organization, see the changes that are happening towards a particular upgrade. So this was for the last major upgrade that happened in February. And for this organization, as you can see, there is a heavy usage of Redshift connectivity, and we know that some of these tasks are going to be business critical, and we need to understand what those changes are, and then try to pick out these tasks to be part of a test suite that could be tested as part of the pre-release. So we have a quick ability to go ahead and look at the tasks that are part of this particular which is using this particular connectors, and then you will be able to look at further details that is associated with it as well. And once you have this info, you can decide whether this particular set of tasks needs to be part of your test suite. The quick distillation of information from perusing the entire release note and identifying what could be the potential impact is automated in this scenario, and you also have the ability to decide based on this impact what are all the things that you need to test. Not everything needs to be tested. From here, you can quickly narrow down to the tasks that are most vital for your organization, and combining that with the impact that we provide kind of intersects with a nice subset of tasks that could be potentially important for testing during an upgrade. So we spoke about identifying the tasks, identifying the assets which are important, right? How do we go about testing it? Or how do we even automate this process, right? So with that in mind, we have this replication feature. So one of the things is you can have multiple target organizations that are configured where you want to replicate into. It could be a pre-release dev, QA, sandbox, etc. Or even for troubleshooting purposes, you can configure if assurance service is enabled on your production and you want to kind of troubleshoot a particular mapping, schedule tasks, etc. in a lower environment, you can use this to just move that specific task or a task flow into a lower environment, do the changes there, test it, and then move it back to the production environment as part of your regular workflow or cadence. The whole idea behind this replication group is to give you the ability to cherry pick assets that are critical for you and that needs to be moved to the pre-release for testing during an upgrade. The other story or the other use case for this is there are changes that are happening, let's say in your dev environment, and you might want to move those changes to seamlessly move those changes into QA. And you know that, okay, you can enable certain developers who can deploy their own changes into QA, and that way you can just keep track of all the things that are happening, but not necessarily involved in performing an import export or giving extra privileges to the users, etc. So it promotes self-service where the developers can themselves be responsible for making sure that, okay, the tasks are tested in a higher environment, and then eventually it comes to a release process where it could be deployed to production. That's one way of simplifying the workflow. The second thing is during an upgrade, there are different organizations or different projects that you're running, and each of them probably needs to test some portion of their things. And as an administrator, you can probably just give the right set of developers the permissions to do this thing, and that way individual teams are responsible for participating in the upgrade and making sure their workflows, process guides, etc., are working as part of the when there is a release happen. With that said, let's try to go ahead and replicate a particular task flow. So you have a task flow, and we know that there are some changes that are happening to this task flow. Let's pick out this task flow and then say that, okay, I want to move it to my pre-release environment, and we can then go ahead and it's just going to ask for credentials to the organization which you want to move this to. And once you have done that, then you can get into the replicated assets page where there is a audit that is showing different entities that has been moved from this organization to the target organization, who was the user who did that, and then what was the status of it. So in this case here, there was a couple of users that was moved, and the user role was moved, whereas this user failed, and the other things went through fine. So as an administrator, this gives you a clear picture of what has changed, what it did, what was moved, and whether it was successful or not. And if there is a failure, there is a feature to download the logs, which was generated part of the service for further troubleshooting as well. Especially in case of the task being moved or the certain assets being moved, there would be an audit entry created as part of your import export as well. So it streamlines this entire process, and you would be able to not only view the logs from here, but also keep track of it from the import export logs that is on your organization. The other thing that kind of helps in this scenario is don't need to worry about kind of creating a test suite every time when you want to every time when there is an upgrade or there was a change that needs to be done into your organization. One of the easiest things that can happen is what we call as a replication group. You can cherry pick assets and then move those things into the replication group. So here I already have this task flow in this replication group. So you can create a replication group, which is a container, a virtual container for different assets that you want to be tested always as part of an upgrade or as part of a deployment that is happening on your organization. This could be useful not just when there is an upgrade that is happening. Let's say there is a change in the connectivity that is happening. There is a new patch that has been deployed to a data warehouse, or there has been new changes that is happening to your cloud databases. So there has been security changes that has happened, etc. So now you want to make sure the workflows that are depending on that particular set of connectivity works fine. So you can very well go ahead and create a replication group for it. And whenever those changes happen, you just have to make sure that the latest and greatest workflows can be replicated from this place, and you have it ready so you can move it to your dev QA organization with the latest changes and start testing it there. So this kind of forms an Uber test suite, or provides the ability to form a test suite, and especially with respect to the migration piece of it. And during an upgrade, when there is a small change, there is a new feature that has been added, you can use this to move it to the pre-release, test the feature there, make sure all your critical workflows are done. Just have to create it once. Subsequent upgrades will take care of refreshing the latest and greatest metadata, and it will be available to you on the pre-release as well. that's on the asset replication and how it would potentially help to streamline the deployment process that is happening within your organizations. It could be used to move assets from dev, QA to sandbox, or it could be used as part of upgrade testing, where you could move assets either from production or sandbox and into your pre-release environment and participate in the pre-release program of Informatica. The final feature or final the feature that we spoke about, a big feature that we spoke about, was around on-demand health check, and this can be done at any point in time for your organization. So here, the report gives you, once you run it, the report gives you the health checks based on three main categories. Some of them are maintenance oriented, some of them are best practices, and then some of them are geared towards performance. These are the three categories that are supported today, but there are roadmap items to support more categories of this. As you can see here, there are few things that that immediately kind of pops up. There are unused connections in this organization. There are users without groups in this organization, which is generally not a best practice, because if the user has specific set of privileges and he moves out of the organization, or for some reason the user is disabled in the organization, then all the privileges that's associated with them are lost. And that means that any tasks, any things that are any changes that has been performed by that user will potentially fail. So with that in mind, we also provide this, not just that these are the recommendations, but here are the users here are the records where you would be able to see more details about it. So we also keep track of all the changes that are happening, especially to the properties of your runtime environment, and if there are any invalid custom properties that has been configured, if there have been any data type mismatch in the property that has already been configured, we will be able to keep track of those things and notify you, and there is a recommendation that's associated with it, so that you would be able to make corrective measures so that the intended use of the property is met. It also gives you it not only gives you the positive side of things, it gives you the negative side of things as well. So you'd be able to see if there are secure agents which are not configured, especially when there is a runtime environment and there are multiple secure agents that are involved. If the configurations are not same across these secure agents, then you would end up seeing different performance characteristics when a task is executed on one secure agent versus another secure agent. A simple thing could be one secure agent has more memory, another one has less in a runtime environment. So when the task gets scheduled on one, it might perform better, and whereas it might fail or even perform poorly on the other one. So with that in mind, we also keep those kind of checks already done. If there is a runtime environment, then there are multiple agents. We'll make sure that, okay, the secure agents are configured as closely to one another as possible. And if there are differences, there is a way to get into it. So that leads us into the next feature, where when there are multiple deployments that are present and there are multiple secure agents that are running, you want to make sure that how these properties are configured and whether there are any significant differences between them. And if so, how do I make those things be in sync, right? So with that in mind, we have provided this option to compare two secure agents. It can be done within the same organization or across organizations, and you'd be able to see all the differences quickly. So in this case, if I just get into the data integration server and look at the engine configuration, so it gives us the changes or the differences between these two secure agents, and if these things should not be different, especially things like optimize ODBC read write. In one agent it's configured as yes, and another one it is configured as false. While false is correct, yes is not correct. So you'd be able to quickly identify such differences, and then you would be able to take corrective measures on it. And if need be, say for example, you're setting up a new runtime environment and you want to configure it very similar to your production, you can leverage the synchronization feature that is available here, and you would be able to synchronize, take this particular agent, let's assume this is your golden record, and then you can take this and synchronize it with other agents within this organization or across organizations. You can pick out other organizations to get to the secure agents of those organizations as well. Setting up new environments is the streamlined, and it's much more easier where you don't need to worry about the different optimizations that has been performed on your production will be lost on a newer environment. It can be configured in the exact same way. Spoke about governance. One of the key things about governance is enforcing some sort of naming convention to the assets in your organization. This is typically done to make sure so that it's an easy way for someone to understand why this asset has been built. The naming is extremely important, as we all know. So with that in mind, we provide an ability to kind of identify violations across different assets. Today, it's supporting cloud data integration. We are going to support the cloud application integration assets pretty soon as well. And there is a simple mechanism where you can configure patterns, which it's a simple regexes to say that, okay, this is the naming pattern that I want to be followed for, say, task flows, connections, etc. And once you've configured it, we'll be able to take that and validate it against against different assets in your organization. And if there are violations, it will be called out here. So you would be able to see how much of these tasks meet the criteria that we have put there for and follows the naming convention, and how many of them don't. The last feature is the other feature that we wanted to kind of highlight is we spoke about a lot of things, but which might seem which is geared towards cloud data integration, but we are starting to support cloud application integration as a product as well in assurance service. So now you'll be able to perform the replications of process guides, connections, etc., and the configuration tracker. You'll be able to see changes with respect to process guides also. The slides has few more information about what is coming up next and how assurance service can help with respect to the changes that are happening in your organization and what more features that are coming in the near future as well. Going back to the slides now. In summary, we saw features where it improves the configuration management, which keeps track of all the changes that are happening, which improves the observability and brings in sort of governance to understand what are all the changes that were made and who made it. The on-demand health checks provide you an ability to keep track of the changes that are happening, how your organization health is with respect to various categories, and provides recommendation on multiple categories. The replication and the support that we had of moving assets from one organization to another organization enables you to perform upgrade testing and reduce the effort in performing upgrade testing by cherry picking assets which are important for you and not moving the entire projects and folders, which might take a lot of time and effort to perform testing across all the assets. And it also helps understand the impact of the upgrade or the new features that are changing or with respect to an upgrade for your organization, and you would be able to ensure that those connectivity related things are tested as part of the pre-release, and thus avoiding any errors that might happen during post-upgrade. The final thing is around the naming convention and how it helps you enforce certain amount of governance into what are the things that are happening. And the products that we saw today are cloud data integration and cloud application integration, and how assurance service helps your organization maintain and manage those products in a much better sense. For any further questions, if you're interested in Assurance Pack, please reach out to your account manager or to your customer success manager, and they will be able to help you find more details about the assurance feature. Thanks for taking the time with us today. Thank you all.
Hello everyone, please post your questions in the Q&A box. We'll try and answer them.
Thanks, Vrinda. So there were a few questions, a couple of questions about whether this is a paid option or is it something that comes out of IICS platform. This is part of the IICS platform, but it is a paid add-on to the platform. For any pricing and other questions with respect to trials that you might have, it would be great if you can reach out to your customer success manager and they would be able to set up the trial motion or further questions or answer further questions that you might have with respect to pricing, etc. The reason why trial is slightly different in this case is this is not like a regular product, and we try to onboard as much metadata as possible from your organization, so there is very little deployment overhead for customers. So with that said, so for trial to happen, we need to make sure that it works as seamlessly as possible during the trial as well. So that's the reason there is a slightly different trial motion. So I'd encourage you to talk to your CSM if there are questions about trial. There were a couple of questions about the applicability of the tool, whether this is more of an administrative tool or more developer focused. It's a mix of both. It's from the perspective that you enable either the administrators or the developers to look at it. For example, the configuration tracking that we show here could be useful for developers as well to understand what changes that they are pushing over a period of time and whether that has any impact, or even to understand the impact that it is going to create if they're pushing the change. So in that sense, it is equally applicable for developers as well. From an administrator standpoint, this gives an overall visibility and governance and observability capabilities on top of the IICS platform, and there are features that we're continuously working on to enable those things. To be more focused on the developer side of things, there are a couple of things that are coming up. One is we are trying to do what we call as mapping comparison, compare two versions of mapping between two different orgs. So that would give us a little bit more insights into what has changed, what is same, what is different, etc. This is more of a developer focused thing, but could be used in a broader sense as well. And similarly, there are recommendations that are coming out which would be applicable for developers as they tweak their tasks and develop their tasks. So that's some of those things are work in progress as well. So stay tuned for that. Questions about whether this utility is going PC to IICS and the relationship to this. PC to IICS is, as it stands today, Power Center to the cloud modernization play is more of a one-time migration utility. So assurance service is kind of or assurance package is more of a logical continuation to that, where once you're moved into the IICS platform, how well we can help you to maintain and manage your platform in a sane fashion. And there are features that are coming up which will be complementary, where you move once the migration is done, there comes a time when you want to test it. So after some runs and you want to test it, so this assurance service, assurance package we are working on capabilities in assurance package to identify test cases that are going to be important for you based on runtime statistics, etc. And this would be applicable for data integration and application integration to start with, while we expand the footprint to other products. Later part of this year, there is a roadmap item to expand assurance service to start fully supporting mass ingestion and cloud data quality, but that's currently how it is done. So to that question, I would say it's a more logical continuation to PC to IIS rather than PC to IICS becoming a functionality into this one. So what could be automated from a deployment standpoint, whether we could automate moving assets from dev to QA to prod? To a certain degree, yes. Currently, this is more of where we provide the ability for you to be a governed process where you cherry pick things and do it on a case by case basis, where you want to perform either upgrade testing or even regular promotion and testing across your organizations. But in the long run, the idea is to make it automated. So there are two things that are happening. One, we are trying to integrate this with GitHub as well. Instead of picking up from a dev organization or a production organization as a source, we will provide an ability for you to choose GitHub or any version control that you're using, Informatica supported version control that you're using as a source, and we can move assets. With that, the process will be automated, where the nature of how it is going to be automated is still being decided, but the first thing will be there will be a version control support, and then it will be the entire deployment process will be automated. To kind of state a North Star goal, today, if you are doing change management on your own with Informatica, so one of the things that happens is with respect to setting up Jenkins or any third-party CI/CD tool. So the overall goal is eventually we want to kind of get rid of it. Those are some topics that I wanted to address, and I think some questions that came on the chat. If there are any further questions, we're happy to take it.
Yes, Ranga, let's wait for some more time. Please post your questions, everyone. Ranga is here to answer your queries. Also, after this webinar, please post your feedbacks and suggestions in the survey that follows. We would like to hear from you. Also, this session is being recorded and will be available in the Informatica Support YouTube channel and the Success portal. You will also be able to download the slide deck in the PDF format from Success portal.
Yeah, just one note on the slide deck. So I didn't go over the entire slide deck. There are a lot more slides which goes into features there. So this could be used as a reference if you have further questions in the future or you want to share it with your team as well. So there was a question about the naming convention part. So the naming convention is a feature where we wanted to provide an ability as an organization for you to enforce certain naming standards for the assets that are being created in your environment. For example, you would want to probably name certain tasks in a certain way, which is very specific to your organization. And you want the developers and the operators to follow that model or follow that naming convention. This could help in multiple things. One, as you know, this clearly demarcates what is, it clearly demarcates things that are, what is the intended functionality of a particular task, connection, task flows, etc. in a given organization. And as the organization grows and the number of assets that you have with Informatica grows, this is super important to quickly identify what that particular entity means by looking at a name. So that's where the naming convention helps. One, by default, we provide a canned list of naming convention as suggested by Informatica for multiple, for all the assets that are supported today from cloud data integration and cloud application integration standpoint, like process guides, tasks, etc. But we give you the ability to customize it for your organizational needs. So you could, it's a simple regular expression. You can go ahead and put in your own regular expression, and all the assets in your organization will be validated against those rules that you have put in, and exceptions will be there, which can then be disseminated and corrected using your change management process. I hope I answered that question. If there are any specific questions that we can take it. And there was a question about partners getting access to test it. So I don't know the answer to that. I'll find out and I'll reach out to you offline.
we have another question from Rama Ranga.
Yeah. Right. So this doesn't enforce the policy, or it doesn't make sure that an asset cannot be created outside of a certain policy, like as mentioned in Azure or any of these things. What it does is, it's after the fact of being developed, if there is a change, then this kind of helps you identify that and say if there are violations with respect to it. Having said that, one of the things that we are working on is to provide an option to kind of catch this early, if at all somehow it slips through the crack of development review, etc. So one of the things that we are working on is when we start supporting GitHub as a source or a version control, we'll be able to keep track of the assets that are there in GitHub and then do a review of the assets and give you some of these suggestions then and there itself before it kind of goes into the production ecosystem. So trying to take the best practices that we have tried and tested out in the development world and starting to apply it more into the data ops world is what we are trying to do with this package.
Thank you, Ranga.
If there are no further questions at this time, please feel free to look out for the materials as Vrinda stated. And if you have any further questions, please reach out to your CSMs or send a feedback and we'll reach out to you. And thanks again for your time today. And thanks for all the great questions.
Yeah, looks like we have answered most of the questions, Ranga. So if we have failed to answer any of your questions, we'll get back to you after this webinar. Thank you for joining us. Hope everyone is safe. And thanks, Ranga, for setting aside some time for this great session. Thanks a lot. See you on our next Tech Tuesdays. Bye.